Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, free pressers, welcome to Free Press Live. We are back again with another live stream. You loved it so much last time. You had to have us back, and here we are. I'm your host, your kind of host, your co-host, Michael Moynihan, and with us today, my friend, my nemesis, Chavista, opinion editor at Newsweek, Batya Ungar-Sargon, comedian, writer, spectator, columnist, and if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, she shows up there once too. Bridget Phetasy joining us live from Rhode Island, and our friend from within the Free Press, Peter Savodnik. Thank you all for joining us, and we got a lot to talk about. It's kind of a slow news cycle. Kamala Harris tomorrow will be in North Carolina talking about her economic plan. A little preview of it, by the way. Price controls. Nixon is back. RFK Jr., who's been on the Honestly show, you know him if you pay attention to politics and if you pay attention to the Free Press. He was polling at one point about 20%, kind of flatlining now. And Ukraine, 2.5 years into the war, what on earth is happening? Ukraine has invaded Russia. What? 8 months it took Russia to gain the amount of territory Ukraine has picked up in Russia, in Kursk, in the past, I don't know, week and a half now. And then finally, we're going to get to the most important story in America. I don't know if you knew this, but there's a lady named Candace Owens, and she's absolutely crazy and obsessed with Jews. We're going to talk about that because it's what America needs right now is a little dose of insane anti-Semitism. Batya, can we start by talking about what's her name that's running for president? What do you call her? Kamala? What's she on about now? What are we talking about? The economic stuff.
Yes, let's do it. Let's talk about some issues. Vice President Kamala Harris is going to propose the United States' first ever federal ban on corporate price gouging in the food and grocery industries. Now, this is part of her broader economic policy platform that she's planning to unveil on Friday at a campaign rally in North Carolina. And she has also been speaking about implementing rent controls, taking on corporate landlords, and capping the cost of prescription drugs. Let's take a look at VP Harris at a Las Vegas rally this past weekend.
Take on big corporations that engage in illegal price gouging, corporate landlords that unfairly raise rents on working families, and take on big pharma and cap the cost of prescription drugs for all Americans.
Now, Trump also made reference to skyrocketing food prices just an hour or so ago at a press conference at his Bedminster Golf Club in New Jersey. But of course, he blamed somebody else. Let's take a look at that.
Prices have skyrocketed. Cereals are up 26%. Bread is up 24%. Butter is up 37%. Baby formula is up 30%. Flour is up 38%. And eggs are up 46%. And many items are up at much higher rates than that. Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She wants price controls. And if they worked, I'd go along with it too, but they don't work. They actually have the exact opposite impact and effect. But it leads to food shortages, rationing, hunger, dramatically more inflation. Their Inflation Reduction Act, by the way, was a disaster.
So, Michael, it seems like we can all agree that the price of food is out of control. But what I want from you is to explain to a no-good commie like me why the government should not be telling companies that they cannot price gouge and what is the right way to bring down the cost of groceries. Go for it.
Batya, I know that you are a no-good pinko, right? We know that. We've established that. We've had one episode already, which was the established Batya as a commie episode. But you support this. You support capping prices on food.
Look, all right. My initial reaction was like, yeah, F around and find out. We're going to take on the... But then obviously I thought about it for a minute and I remembered, the Cultural Revolution in China, 40 million people starving to death. Like, I know obviously
they fucked around and found out.
This is bad. So my question to you, Michael, is what is the right way to bring down the cost of groceries? Because it really is killing the average American.
Well, let's start with the wrong way, which is price control. There are about 3 things. I could be generous and say there are more than that, but there's basically 2 to 3 things that every economist agrees on doesn't work. price controls being one of them, rent control being another. That is something that Kamala Harris has also suggested. Would be an absolute disaster because it obviously leads to shortages. I mean, when you're look, the suggestion, this is what pisses me off so much. The suggestion that this is why things are so expensive is absolutely bananas. And she clearly knows it's not true. I mean, they absolutely know it's not true, but this is bad populism. This is what happens because economics is hard. Economics is complicated. It's very easy to say, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to stop making things so expensive. And people say, yeah, no, I like that. But it's really, really hard to take the other tack and be the economist who says, okay, this is what's wrong with price controls. This is what's wrong with rent controls. It dries up the market. It just doesn't really work for people. They just want things for free. Give it away. I'll give you this. I'll give you that. And guess what happens when you give things away? You have inflation. And what happens when you have inflation? You have high food prices.
Okay. It's a great point. Bridget, my question to you as our resident normie whisperer is this, irrespective of whether this is going to work, isn't this going to play really well with regular people?
It seems like it. I mean, I'm going to start calling her Kamala. That's my new nickname for her. I don't know. I think it depends. Everything feels so partisan being in kind of normie land and seeing, the difference that I've really noticed being just around family, friends, Normieville, is the two Americas are actually the very online and the people who aren't very online. And the people who aren't very online, it's like a game of telephone and they just hear whatever the headlines are that come through their phones for whatever side they're kind of on. So the people who follow Trump will hear what he said. The people who follow Kamala will, they'll kind of just go with this. And it sounds nice, but isn't this, I'm not like a brilliant economist, but isn't this printing all that free money how we got here? Isn't
Bridget,
that
are you a mediocre economist?
I'm just I'm not any kind of economist at all. Not even a mediocre one. But am I mistaken in the money printing goes burr? Is that how we arrived at this moment where food is expensive?
You're not mistaken. You're right. This is a brilliant political move precisely because it can never happen. It's unenforceable. It's probably unconstitutional. And then there are the economics. But it's so smart because she never has to go forward with it. It's never going to go anywhere. And in a way, it's actually more innocuous than the Biden proposal a few years back to forgive college tuition. That was actually in many ways like much worse because that affects the way families plan and save and live. This is bad. It's a sop. It's cynical, all that, but it's not going to change, I think, people's behavior.
But Peter, I think that you're right about that, and it's a right comparison because the administration and Biden himself understood and even referenced this, that the student loan forgiveness was going to be probably unconstitutional, but we're going to do it anyway. Right. That was the line. And this might not work, but we'll just do it anyway, and we'll tell people this. It does have a long tail effect when you keep lying to people about, what we're going to do and how everything is going to be the land of milk and honey. And, we have the power to lower prices. I don't know if they believe that the companies decided not to raise prices under Trump and then all decided to collude
Okay,
together.
All right, Michael.
All right.
Michael, it is undeniable that, there were, after the pandemic, there were a series of things that raised the cost of many things, including these like supply chain crisis, right? Yeah. And as a result, companies really, really increased the prices of things in response to increased costs.
Sure.
It is also the case that when a lot of those problems went away, like most of the supply chain crisis was pretty much solved until the Houthis started, messing with us. Okay. But a lot of the issues, most of the supply chain crisis was resolved and companies did not lower their prices. They kept them high. I mean, the Wall Street Journal, which is like no commie outlet, reported on this. And I think the problem here is that she's identified the wrong target. The profit margin specifically in grocery stores is extremely small. I mean, that is not where the
Extremely
problem
small.
is.
People don't
it's
understand
extremely
this.
small.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but the greedflation is real. The price gouging is real, and I feel like we should be able to say that without saying.
How do you define that? Just out of curiosity, like what? Because price gouging means like unconscionable prices. Like what's unconscionable?
But
Well,
wasn't
you
there
know-
that whole egg thing?
The what?
The
Oh,
eggs. Wasn't that? Didn't they find out that the eggs ended up being? It was actually price gouging. Didn't they?
but like
wasn't it-
what? Who says like what? Like who's gonna say like which bureaucrat in Washington is gonna tell us that this is like over
Right.
market?
No, I agree with you. There's a problem of implementation, but I also actually wanted to ask you about this, Peter. Harris seems to me to be running an almost perfect campaign in the 2 weeks she's been at it. And I say that kind of, not that I, admire it so much as I admire the audacity of it,
Yeah.
like refusing to take any interviews because she knows she's really bad at them. But also I think there are a few admirable things, like, so far she hasn't bashed Biden. We'll see what happens tomorrow. And also, I think actually avoiding appeals to identity politics has been really smart. And probably there's a lot of people telling her the opposite, and she's resisted that. I'm curious what you make so far of her campaign.
I mean, actually, the price gouging plan is interesting because it does create an opening or a point of difference between the Harris campaign and the Biden-Harris administration. Right? It was just, I think, last week that the administration put out this plan saying that if we want to make more housing in, say, California, I think it was California, we have to slash red tape, which is actually a very good idea. So they deserve credit for that, right? Like, if we actually want to make life better for the working and middle classes, the way everyone seems to claim that they do, then the place to start is to say, what are all the things that we're doing wrong? And then stop doing those things. Not do anything new, just stop doing lots of really stupid things. And so the question for the Harris campaign, and I have no idea if she'll actually ever actually, I know she'll never answer it, but if the journalists actually want to do their job and ask her, the question to ask her is like, so are you part of the Biden-Harris team, or are you on the Harris, sort of like faux populist, plan? Because you can't really have both. You can't call for like slashing red tape in California and being price gouging, whatever that means.
Bridget, is there something you could hear from Harris tomorrow in her address about economics that would make you say, hey, this is my candidate? Like, is there something she could say that you would think this actually would help struggling Americans? And that's the kind of thing that I would really go for.
I mean, it's a good question. It just seems funny that all the policy I've heard from her sounds like communism. Like the only things I've heard sounds an awful lot like that. It's also weird that everybody just ignores like the Independent Contractor Act, which seems like it should be unconstitutional. That got passed under Biden and Harris. And I don't know what's going on with it. I know there are lots of people who are pushing back against it, and I think there are lawsuits, but that's allegedly in place right now. And these are things that seem very much like they would hinder the working class.
Couple of things before we move on here. One, I just have to say this to you, Batya. What happens in markets here is if one company decides, if there's no collusion, if one company decides that we're going to keep those prices high that have been high for legitimate reasons because the input costs have been so high, that allows everybody else to just say, I'm going to undercut you a little bit and start taking that market share until they can get down to a margin that makes, they're still making money. So I think that's kind of a thing, but also correct about the campaign. And Peter's right. I think this is a good policy. Unfortunately, I mean, you look at what's happened in Argentina with Milei and the slashing of red tape with apartments, and the prices of apartments have absolutely collapsed, which is a very, very good thing. All right. Well, the media is obviously doing its little fawning stuff. Harris, a little bit.